we are trading in US dollar, but nothing comes out of it positively.
Malaysia is well on our way to becoming a high-income nation.
Be part of an IGO just to do that.
We have to act in Malaysia's interests first.
Not much has been done by the assemblymen from past.
The education qualification of a person is not that important.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Headlines. My name is Amalina Kamal, your host for this latest round of Information Digest. Of course, I'm also joined by my lovely co-host, Hazwin Hassan. Welcome Hazwin back to Beyond the Headlines.
Hi Malina, always nice to be back.
Yes, and today we are going to bring you another episode to discuss the developments surrounding the Sungai Bakap polls as well as Malaysia setting its sights on a BRICS membership. Now, Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim recently announced last week this particular interest showing a shift towards a more balanced global structure. It's a mixing of interests here between the Western economic order and China's growing influence. Now, regardless of whether Malaysians are actually pro or anti-BRICS, the group's future direction seems pretty steady.
Yes, and Malaysia is already making waves by using the ringgit more in trade with regional buddies like Indonesia, Thailand and China. And we're now the fifth ASEAN country that's in line and expressed interest in a BRICS membership. Certainly, there's a lot to discuss about this. And for that, we have joining us in the studio today, former Deputy Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry, Dr. Ong Kian Ming.
Hi,
Dr. Kian Ming. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
And next to Dr. Kian Ming, we have the Head of Research and Senior Research Fellow at the Malaysian Institute of Economic Research, MIR for short, Dr. Shankaran Nambiar.
Hi, Hazwin.
Dr. Nambiar, welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Great to be on the show.
Nice to have you on, and both of you gentlemen have you both here on our show.
So lovely.
Very much, yes. So Malaysia is set to hold the ASEAN chairmanship next year. And I feel like this BRICS membership, or at least taking steps towards having this membership, comes timely, right? And on that, how crucial is it for Malaysia to be joining BRICS at this juncture?
I think before we go into the whole issue of Malaysia chairing ASEAN and its implications for Malaysia's application to join BRICS, we need to look at the timing of when Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar made that statement or made that announcement, because that was just a few days before the visit of Premier Lee Chang coming to celebrate the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties between Malaysia and China. And I think one could easily interpret Prime Minister's move to make the announcement for the application as a way to show that Malaysia is balancing our sort of like priorities and foreign relations between the Western and the Eastern Bloc, right? Or the Western and the non-Western Bloc. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be interesting to discuss why Datuk Sri Anwar chose to make that statement then, and also the possible positive impact that will have on Malaysia further down the road.
So, in terms of the positive impact it will have, what specific trade and investment opportunities then that Malaysia can look forward to by being a member of BRICS? Maybe, Nambiar, you can...
I think the timing is perfect. The recent announcement, you see precursors to that.
Right.
When Anwar Ibrahim went over to China, he did raise issues. De-dollarization, Asian Monetary Fund. And all these things are very much in line with BRICS thinking.
Right.
So these thoughts were already nascent and expressed earlier on. And he's also been talking about the narrative, changing the narrative. He's used that in different contexts. But broadly, he is making himself out to be, or positioning himself as someone who wants to champion the cause of the developing world, as someone who is willing to be a friend, or who is a friend of the West, but a friend who would also like to stand by his own line of thinking. And as Kian Ming mentioned, what better time to mention this or to announce this than when Li Qiang was around. Also, I think it seems to make sense to bring this up at this point as we head towards being the chair for ASEAN next year.
Yep.
It's an excellent opportunity to come out as providing leadership, a new kind of leadership for the South, for ASEAN, very much, I suppose, in the spirit of maybe Sukarno, Nehru, etc., a new kind of non-alignment in these times.
Right. You've said just previously that it requires a bit of a balancing act, Malaysia, right now, because we want to keep our Western allies close, but we also want to make sure that we have our ties with, the East here, China particularly, close too. So what exactly is the challenge in doing this balancing act?
And if I might add, how can we mitigate, our regional counterparts, our regional partners seem to think that we are so pro-China to the point where we might be at the brink of, being their scapegoat of sorts, or like victims of future potential sanctions then? That's
taking the argument too far. I mean, to see Malaysia as, what you're saying is sort of tantamount to saying that there is this fear that Malaysia would be a vassal state of China. I don't think there's anything like that's happening, and I think Anwar knows enough to be able to see this distinction of being friendly and being absorbed by China. So I don't think there's any such fear. And if he's able to stand up, in a sense, to the West, I think he can also stand up to China. It's I think, just a question of asserting how he sees where Malaysia should be standing. So, of course, you're likely to have misconceptions, preconceptions of the kind that you have just mentioned, and I think a similar sense could prevail among the Western countries. They could have concerns as to which side Malaysia is leaning towards.
Right.
And I think that there have been disagreements about this in various circles. For instance, I think in Germany some time back, there has been one minister who says any country is free to choose whom it wants to be friends with. There's been another minister who's voiced concern about who's a friend with whom. But I think the relationship that Malaysia has had with the US, for instance, is a very mature one. There have been concerns, but there has also been a deepening of relations, however you want to look at it, in terms of investment, in terms of trade investment, in terms of defense engagement. I think the cooperation has gone on. And I think it must be emphasized that Malaysia all along has looked at these things in a very pragmatic fashion.
Right. Yeah, so let me sort of like draw the conversation back to BRICS. And I agree with Nambia in the sense that Malaysia is in no danger of being a vassal state to China. But when we talk about BRICS, we also have to realize that there are other countries in BRICS as well. And I think the overemphasis on looking at this as a way to balance between US and China is one that is not quite, I think, accurate. And, from a Malaysian foreign policy perspective, we should not be positioning this as something to balance against between China and the US. Because there are, like what you say, other advantages, possible advantages of being in BRICS, which the government has to explain in a clearer way. So firstly, being able to have trade settlements in non-US dollar sort of like swap arrangements, right? And just as an example, China is our largest trading partner. We already settle about 25% of our trade with China using non-US dollar, basically renminbi and ringgit direct exchanges. We can increase that. Whether or not we need to be in BRICS to do that or not, that's something I think the government should explain. So that would be one. Whether we can do similar kind of currency settlements with Brazil, with India. I don't think we have that much trade with Russia and with South Africa. So that's one. The second, I think, area of possible benefit within the larger BRICS context, and not just China, would be possible access to BRICS-related funding for infrastructure projects. And that avenue is open through something called the New Development Bank, or NDB, that was set up by the initial BRICS countries. We are not quite sure to what extent substantive investment projects have been approved using that channel. But on the part of Malaysia, we also have to be careful with regards to what we are asking to be funded. Right? Nothing has been announced. This kind of channel is not quite clear yet. But we know through the Belt and Road Initiative, the largest infrastructure investment project in Malaysia to date is the ECRL. Right, which will cost us probably to the tune of 60 billion ringgit. So do we want to have those kinds of infrastructure investments under the BRICS arrangement through the New Development Bank? I think that's the second large question or bucket of questions that we have to answer. And then the third area would be what Prime Minister has said with regards to speaking up for the global south, so to speak, agendas of importance to the developing world. Then my question would be, is BRICS the most effective platform for this? Are there other platforms such as the G77 that could be useful, right? And also related to this third bucket of speaking out for the global south, Malaysia is well on our way to becoming a high-income nation, right? We can see, for better or for worse, Thailand applying to join BRICS. At the same time, they are also applying to join the OECD. Right? Should we have that kind of aspirations to join the ranks of developed nations rather than to remain within the sort of like confines of calling ourselves or being part of the developed world? And it is probably one of the reasons, and I'll stop here, why Indonesia has perhaps expressed some concern about joining BRICS. Right? That may not be the only concern, but it's something that we should flag and be aware of.
But is there like a risk of a bit too much overdependence rather on China through this partnership?
Exactly. That's why, if let's say we were to enter BRICS and be part and parcel of the ecosystem, it cannot be about China. It cannot be only about China. It has got to be part and parcel of a larger narrative where our strategic interests are upheld. Which is why, perhaps for me, I sort of like maybe disagree slightly with Nambia in the sense that we should not have made that announcement to join BRICS or to apply to join BRICS just prior to Premier Lee Chiang's visit. Because we should not see this as a way to balance or to appease China. It should be another kind of strategic discussion that we should have vis-a-vis our interests with these large countries. And I think Prime Minister tried a little bit to do that when he emphasized that he communicated with Brazil and the President of Brazil in terms of his interest to apply to enter into BRICS, because Brazil is hosting BRICS this year. Right. So again, we should widen the conversation and not just look at this as a China play.
I agree with Kian Ming. I don't see this entirely as a China initiative. I mean, there is this tendency to kind of confine it and to make it sound as an entirely China initiative. I don't think that's very accurate. You have, on one hand, Russia, and you have India, which, I mean, India has its disagreements with China on certain things. It has its agreements with China on other things. India does a great deal of trade with China. So I think there are other issues that bind these countries together. And as Ken Ming rightly pointed out,
Right.
there are other issues which are very important. There's this question of de-dollarization. Although again, I think that is something that makes for a very good tagline. Makes for it's got a huge soundbite to it. De-dollarization. It is with BRICS or without BRICS. I suppose there is a sense that we need to move away from the dominance of just one currency.
Right.
We perhaps moving towards multipolar currency.
Right.
I think the currency, the US accounted for something like 70% of currency reserves in maybe 2000, 2001. Now it's about 59%. So you find that there is a decrease in US participation.
Right.
And countries are finding it too constraining to be a part of cross-border platforms such as SWIFT, chips, etc. They want alternatives. Euro wants to stand out on its own. It wants its currency to be more widely used. I think China also. And China right now accounts for what, 2.5%, 3%. So it's not even a competitor to the US dollar.
Right.
So I think too much is being made of this story of China leading this de-dollarization campaign.
Right, right. BRICS actually accounts for at least 37.3% of the world GDP as of this year, and more than half as much as European Union at 14.5%. But as you mentioned, there's growing frustration because, you know, we are trading in US dollar, but nothing comes out of it positively in a sense. I just want to understand this. When it comes to Malaysia joining BRICS and how we can actually contribute to the establishment of an Asian monetary fund, what sort of challenges we must look into first at addressing?
Yeah, so I think we should take those two issues separately.
Okay.
The reason is simple. When you talk about an Asian monetary fund, right, you have to refer to the largest economies in Asia. And that does not include Brazil, that does not include Russia, right? So those discussions take place separately. And of course, if you want it to be truly Asian, representative of Asia, you need the buy-in of the second or third largest economy, depending on how you measure it, in Asia, which is Japan. And I think as long as the Americans are putting pressure and wanting the Japanese cooperation with them on other geopolitical and security matters, Japan is not going to buy into that notion of the Asian Monetary Fund. So that is one discussion. The other discussion with regards to currency settlement is, I think, for the sake of your audience, there are a few reasons why these countries want, including Malaysia, want to settle in currencies other than the US dollar. Firstly, it actually saves us money, right? When we want to settle in US dollars, what it means is that, let's say, ringgit, we swap it with US dollar, and then US dollar swap it with renminbi to settle. There is a transaction cost there in terms of the currency swap. And if we can do it directly, then it will save both exporters and importers, some financial transactions. And, to take this forward a little bit more substantively, I referred to the ECRL, right? It's going to cost us 60 billion ringgit.
Right.
We owe that money to China's Exim Bank, right? And if, let's say, we continue to rely on the dollar to settle that payment, it will cost the Malaysian taxpayer even more to service the loans associated with the ECRL. If, let's say, we could settle it ringgit-renminbi exchange without having the US dollar swap, that would save us money. We don't need BRICS to make that happen, but if let's say just us joining BRICS can facilitate that, all the more better for the Malaysian taxpayer. And the final note with this, with regards to this kind of currency settlement or financial payments, channel would be what Nambia said just now. I think countries such as Russia and China are looking for alternatives to SWIFT, which basically shut Russia out of the international financial payment system after the invasion of Ukraine, right? So they are looking for alternatives, and I think if us joining BRICS allows us to have another alternative, if let's say, for example, something happens in the Taiwan Straits that forces the financial access to Chinese, the Chinese government to be shut off, we also want to have availability of other settlement systems. Whether or not that needs to take place within the context of BRICS, it remains to be seen.
I mean, it sounds to me that it is a matter of currency exchange, and that we need to sort of
just one part
trying to mitigate any extra charges or any extra work around it, right? Yes. So I feel like it's a bit redundant then to have to form another IGO, be part of an IGO just to do that, right? If that's the main goal. That's how I see it.
And I agree with you. That's why when people bring up the issue of de-dollarization and settlement in other currencies, my response would be, I think the government needs to show the larger public and the international markets and investors the added advantage of joining BRICS that allows us to do these kinds of settlements. So, for the sake of argument, for example, if let's say we can have a trilateral agreement between Malaysia, India and China to settle among ourselves in our own currencies without using the US dollar, can BRICS facilitate that, right? So I'm just throwing out an idea. Sure. Whether or not that is feasible, that is in the game plan of the government, we are not quite sure. And I think perhaps Prime Minister and the other cabinet ministers may not have thought these things out in a more structured and long-term way. I think this is something that needs further elaboration and discussion on the part of government.
Right. What do you think about BRICS then being in direct competition to our partnership with Japan? Because ASEAN is very friendly. We're very well connected to Japan. And as you said yourself, Japan's not party to the whole Asian the Asian currency or Asian monetary fund, rather. So wouldn't this jeopardize our relationship with Japan in some ways?
I don't think there's a question. It's not a binary kind of response. You're my friend, or if you're not my friend, then you're my enemy. I don't think it works that way. I think very interesting point that Kian Ming mentioned. Now, if I'm having trade with Kian Ming, we can do that exchange right away with my currency, his currency. We don't need your currency as an intermediary. And I have to do all my transactions via you, which increases the cost of any transaction. But why do I have to do it? I have to do it because we have these network effects. We have been doing it, and we have been doing it for years, and there are so many countries which are party to this whole process. It's now difficult to extricate yourself from it. And to say, no, we don't need this intermediary, we don't need Hazwin, we can settle it among ourselves. Because it's just not a matter of me transacting just with Kian Ming. There is a mechanism, that there are platforms that are involved, SWIFT, CHIPS, whatever. And I think, this whole thing, these whole network effects will have to be reorganized. And I think that's one reason why it's good to have an organization, a grouping, maybe which just initially talks about these things. I don't know to what extent BRICS executes what it talks about, and how concrete and solid these the subsequent arrangements are. They used to talk about cables, etc., fiber optic cables, etc. And I think they started the conversation maybe 10 years back or longer. And I think up to date, these fiber optic networks or cables or whatever are still not in place. But it gives a good platform to talk about things, and you have a group of people who have similar views about these things, and hopefully something concrete comes out of it. And I think, yeah, please.
Yeah, on the Japan-ASEAN issue, I think within the context of discussions between different parties and with ASEAN, there's already a structured framework, especially during the sidelines of the ASEAN summit. You have the American president coming to engage. You have the Chinese president coming to engage. You have India coming. You have the EU ASEAN summit. So those kinds of formats are already in place. I don't think any one of those countries should feel that BRICS would somehow affect these kinds of existing arrangements in a negative way. And I think probably the larger question that Malaysia and Malaysians have to ask would be, are we sending the wrong signal by the fact that we are trying overly hard to be seen as being balanced or balancing, to the extent that our balancing becomes an unbalanced balancing act.
Yeah, no, I
Right?
agree.
So I think that is something that I would pay more attention to. It shouldn't be a case whereby, for example, if you give a 5G network to a Western country, you have to balance it out by giving another 5G network to China. That is not how I think balancing our own strategic interests should be undertaken. Right? I think we should have a much more systematic way of thinking about how we protect our own interests at the same time as managing our relationship with the different groupings that we're part of and the different countries that we have trade, investment, and security ties with.
Right.
I think we should be free to determine whom we want to talk to and what
Right.
we want to talk to about.
Right.
At the same time, preserving our independence. And I think it's very important to keep in mind, to keep the economic security or economic defense, the economic security or strategic interest nexus in mind. And that means we have to look at the wider implications, but we also have to make sure that they are pragmatic, they make sense to us, and that we are not trying to jump around, hop around in order to cater to the interests of one country or another.
Right.
I think that kind of independence, that kind of independence is very important as we go ahead, because it seems to be getting to be a more fragmented world, a more contentious world. So I think we have to act in Malaysia's interests first.
Okay. And certainly not to be penalized for it. I mean, especially when we're trying to be diplomatic when it comes to engaging with certain parts of the world, I suppose.
On diplomatic.
yeah.
Are we running out of time?
Yeah,
actually?
less than 5 minutes.
Right.
But it's okay.
But just,
Yeah.
one thing. On diplomatic, I think more than anything, what people like myself, and I think many would agree, that this is a sort of a balance of power play, kind of. We're keeping our interests, we're trying to preserve our interests, but at the same time trying to put ourselves out there as, we're friendly with everyone. So is this really, optics-wise, this is what it looks like? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so it is fine for us to send out the message to say we want to be friendly to everyone, right? But how does this get actualized from a strategic perspective? And I think just focusing on today's topic, when we talk about BRICS, one also has to realize that just because we are in a grouping with countries in BRICS, which include a couple of recent additions, Saudi Arabia as well as Iran, it doesn't mean that the interests of these countries would naturally cohere with us, just because we may be at similar levels of development. They would have their own interests, and what they have sort of like over us would be all of them are much bigger economies than us. They have a much bigger population than us. They have much bigger militaries than us. So when we go into BRICS as a small country, are we then able to project our voice into that context? Are we able to have our interests represented within that grouping, right? Whether it's in the area of digital economy, whether it's in the area of sustainability, whether it's in the area of global rules, So I'm not quite sure that argument has been put forth on the table in a clear and coherent way. So that's why when I say it's fine to be, friendly to everyone, the next question that you guys should be asking, that we should be asking the government would be, what are the strategic imperatives that you want to get out of this? And I think when the Prime Minister made that announcement, I don't think there was a very strong narrative and imperative that was announced. I think the only person that tried to make a good claim in terms of possible investment benefits was Tengku Zafrul as MITI Minister. Right? So, and we wait to see the results.
Right. Nambia?
I think it's terribly important that we preserve our voice. Most of the countries in BRICS, I think up to this point at least, or the founding members, the very huge economies, India doesn't lose if it doesn't trade with US very much. It can stand up to even Europe as it has been doing, as it did over the purchase of oil from Ukraine. So it's very important for Malaysia not to be drowned by these big voices. And there are likely to be, there are almost surely going to be points of disagreement. That there are some things on which we're not going to look at things the same way as China does. We're not going to look at some things as the way Iran does. We might, I think Palestine has also applied to be in BRICS. That's something that the Prime Minister would have something to say on.
Right.
But there are other things on which there would be disagreement. And I think our ability to project a voice which represents our own interests would be very important. And I think this grouping goes way beyond trade. I see a lot of comments in the papers, etc., about how BRICS will improve trade, etc., investment. It could, it might, but I think in terms of BRICS, think of it as some fashion of G7, rather than as a grouping of countries that is going to hammer out the TPPA or RCEP. So it's not basically a grouping that is going to arrive at some trade document and say these are the goods on which we are going to remove tariffs, etc., etc. That's not the only thing they're talking about. They're talking about counterterrorism. They're talking about currency reserves, etc., etc. Whole broad range of issues. So yes, there are lots of benefits of being a part of such a grouping. We are likely to be misperceived by, as you mentioned, Japan, in which case we would have to communicate very clearly to them what our intentions are. And I think most important of all, as Ken Ming has said, not just to correct the narrative, the Western narrative, but also to formulate a very clear narrative on why we are joining BRICS and what we hope to get out of it.
Right.
Right.
Of course, the idea of de-dollarization and even the term of it is quite sexy, as one
Enticing.
would put it.
Yeah.
Enticing,
Yeah.
as one would put
No,
it. Because
more than that, there are good
Yeah.
economic
Yes.
imperatives for that to take place.
Right, yeah. But I mean, the bigger picture is that like Malaysia needs to be more visible or at least transparent in terms of where it's actually heading, especially when it comes to a BRICS membership here, right?
Right.
Okay.
And the onus is on the government to do that. Yeah.
That's quite true. But what we know is that threats of sanctions grow empty day by day, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe just one
Yeah.
one last point on this, since you brought up the issue of potential threats and also sanctions.
Right.
Given Malaysia's position as a small country, I do not think we would be well placed, even by joining BRICS, to, for example, be able to escape from our companies possibly being sanctioned and cut out of the international payment system if our companies were to be found trading Russian oil, for example, or trading with Iran in a very direct way that goes against the sanctions put on by them, by the US government. We are just too well integrated into the financial system, global financial system, and also too small to be able to come up with alternatives and to be able to fight back in a way that perhaps India and China can. So
Right.
we should be cognizant of that. I think our companies are very cognizant of that, especially after a trading company was highlighted in a list to have traded
Links with
electronic
Russia.
components with Russia.
Right.
So we should take note of that, and I am glad that MITI is taking note of that.
Right. Unfortunately, this is the end of this particular segment. But again, to our audience back at home, if you like this particular segment and you want to share your thoughts, please do so in the comment section. Again, I would like to thank my panel, my lovely panel here that's here. First, Dr. Shankar Nabia, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate your insights, as well as Dr. Ong Kia Ming. Thank you so much. Do not go anywhere. We'll see you in the next segment. Welcome back, everybody, and this is the second segment for today's episode. Now, an eventful battle is currently happening for the upcoming Sungai Bakap polls. Now, the by-election was actually triggered due to the death of Assemblyman Pas Nur Zamri Latif on May 24th. Now, in terms of the candidacy, a straight fight is seen between Pakatan Harapan's Dr. Johari Arifin as well as Perikatan Nasional's Abidin Ismail. Smaller parties in this particular by-election have chosen not to participate. Now, for this particular segment, we want to introduce a political analyst, Dr. Ainul Azili Hasno. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines, Doctor.
Thank you.
Also joining us, we have Dr. Ong Kia Ming again for this particular segment. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
thanks
I'm
for
so
having
happy
For
that you
staying
were
on,
able
yeah.
to
Thank you.
stay on as well. Now, in terms of Sungai Bakap, just want to go through the history as well as the voter demographic for our audience back home. Don't necessarily know. Now, Sungai Bakap obviously is in Penang. It has been held by Pakatan Harapan since 2008, before Nur Zamri. Now, the demographics actually is broken down to 59.4% Malay, 22% Chinese, 17.4% Indian, as well as 0.7% for others. Now, Nur Zamri actually won the 2023 state seat with a 1,500 plus vote majority, in which they were banking on the Malay voters, and in particular for this coming one, PN also aims to retain the Malay voters. First question, when it comes to Sungai Bakap, ground reports are saying that there's going to be a swing. What sort of swing are we going to talk about here? Is it swing of a vote of protest or a swing of a Malay vote? What are we talking about right
Doc,
now?
you want to start first?
Okay. As I can see that, as we have seen in the by-election in Kuala Lumpur Baru, the voters turnout were not that good. It was only
yeah.
61%. So this time around, I do think that the turnout of voters will not be that high compared to Penang's election in 2023 in August, in which the voters turnout was 72.67%. If you see the by-election before this, it's always a status quo. The party that holds the seat will definitely win. But I think this time around, PAS could not retain this seat. There are a lot of factors. One of it is because voters are no more interested in what they call the green wave. That was what the hype in 2023, and this time around there's not so much issue that they can play around. The only issue that is still playing among the voters are the issue of water. But as we have seen the statement from the Deputy Minister of Energy, Transformation and Water, Akmal, he said that whether Pakatan Harapan wins or they lose this time around, the federal government will help the people of Sungai Bakap to overcome the issue of water that has been plaguing that area, especially in Mukim Lima, for the past 6 years.
Has PAS not been able to make any significant contributions since winning that seat last year?
I don't think they have made a lot of contributions. We have seen the late Nur Zamri. It was only around. He was the adun for only around 8 months. So nothing much has been done by him, or perhaps by Perikatan Nasional as a whole. And they were shocked that they won 11 state seats, because before this, the election and before last year, Perikatan Nasional in particular, PAS only won 1 seat, and the rest were won by Pakatan Harapan and BN. They won 2 seats. So this time around, when they got 11, they were quite shocked. And then the opposition leader in the state assembly, Fauzi Yusof, has not done much. I don't think there is much has been done by Perikatan Nasional, especially PAS. So I think this time around, voters will think that they will definitely sway back to the unity government, and also they wanted to support the government of Penang, because they feel that not much has been done by the assemblyman from PAS.
But then again, I mean, Perikatan Nasional only having, just 10 seats, especially when it comes to the state itself. So in a way, they probably would just fall back on, we don't have much, power to move things. And then, as you can see, when it comes to the water issue, the candidate has always been saying that the party has been pushing for that, but the roadblock usually happens on the state level. So
I have a bit of a different view from Dr. Aino, in the sense that when we look at the voting trends in the state elections in 2023, followed by the Kuala Lumpur by-elections, I think what is clear to me is that the large majority of Malay voters is clearly supporting Perikatan Nasional. I did a study on 47 seats that were contested by the DAP in the 2023 state elections, and I found that 4 out of 5 Malay voters who voted for UMNO, Barisan Nasional, in the 2022 parliamentary elections switched their votes to Perikatan Nasional in the straight fight in 2023. And this was in a context when it was quite clear that the federal government was in the hands of PH and the unity government, and it was very likely that the state government would be retained by PH together with BN. And still in that context, 80% of Malay BN voters supported PN. And what I saw in the Kuala Lumpur by-elections is also very similar, in the sense that 80% of the Malay voters that comprise 50% of the voter base in Kuala Kubu Baru voted for the Perikatan Nasional candidate, even though the state government was firmly a PH plus BN government, and the federal government was also a PH BN unity government. So I think it is not that clear to me that the Malay voters would swing back in large numbers to PH in this case, although there may be certain arguments to show that maybe there may be some votes swing back. For example, among the military and the police voters in Kuala Kubu Baru, we saw that shift. But the number of military and police voters in Sungai Bakap is not that high. It's not more than 1,000 according to the figures.
57.
Yes, so it's not very high. So that's not going to make a very big difference, even if you include the civil servants who would be casting postal votes.
Well, 4 key polling districts here have been identified, especially when it comes to the Malay majority areas. So we've got Tasik Junjong, Puteri Gunung, Sungai Duri, as well as Kampong Besar. Tasik Junjong in particular had only an 80 vote difference in the last election. When we talk about Pakatan Harapan's chances here, what they're actually looking forward to is actually no vote of protest of sorts, right? But in the last KKB by-election, we saw a glimpse of that. So what sort of, I suppose, opportunities or at least campaign strategies they must embark on, in particular before the polling day itself?
I think one issue that we are not quite sure how the voters will react to would be the increase in the diesel prices. Right? I think I support that policy on the part of the government, because we need to have that kind of subsidy targeting to prevent the kind of leakages and smuggling that the government has been talking about. But that is, of course, an issue that can be played up. And I think from a communications perspective, the government could have done better in terms of managing that narrative. So to the extent that this issue can be played up even above and beyond the water issue, which perhaps voters don't really think that whoever gets voted in as Adun can help really solve that problem. So then it falls back to some of these other issues of possible protest votes. And possibly the opposition would also bring in the issue of, now it's diesel, maybe later this year, there will be an increase in the petrol price, and this is how you can send a protest vote against the current government.
So that's why the government should actually explain the rationalization of the subsidy that is being pulled up, the diesel, because still we do have Budi, and also people are being given fleet card and all that. But these things, the laymen do not really understand the mechanism that the government is introducing, So like Dr. On said, definitely people are now thinking of first diesel, later petrol and other things, and these are all the bread and butter issues that the voters especially, they are worried that things will get worse in the future.
It's basically just understanding what this whole subsidy rationalization is all about, basically. I mean, you can talk about diesel, but any other things as well, I suppose. Okay.
Yeah, I want to touch more on the candidates.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Actually, because we're aware of what issues are key now and at stake for either side. But there's been some scrutiny on one particular candidate, the PAS man,
Abidin Ismail, basically
his qualifications. So I mean, it's really technically not down to his own doing. It was actually during the announcement of his candidacy by the past Deputy President Datuk Seri Tuan Ibrahim. He said that Abidin holds an ISO certification, which we all know is only meant for companies. As statutory bodies. So,
and we all know how that played out and how the reports.
And then he was then immediately compared to the PhD holder of the PH candidate, Johari. And will this prove costly for Abidin, for the PN candidate?
Well, the blunder was made by the Deputy President when he announced the candidate for Perikatan Nasional. But I don't think this issue will be blown out as what we have seen in the by-election in Kuala Kubu Baru. The candidate from Perikatan Nasional, he did not really mention, he did not admitted that what qualification that he had. So I think this thing will hype down later on. I don't think it will be a big issue because the blunder was made not by the candidate, but it was made by the deputy president of PAS.
My feeling is that having been a member of parliament and having campaigned, personally and also for others, the education qualification of a person is not that important, as long as that person doesn't lie about his or her education qualification. I think the voters would look at other factors in terms of evaluating a candidate. It would be whether or not that person can serve the constituents well. If that person is an incumbent, then whether or not that person has done his or her job serving the constituents when he or she was the MP or Adun. If it's a new constituent, I think a new candidate, I think people will look at whether or not that person knows local issues or not and is able to articulate those local issues in ways that are convincing and assuring to the voter base.
Right. Well, to our audience as well as to our guests, we do have ground reports and also some comments from Sungai Bakap residents.
It's another state seat by-election, this time in Sungai Bakap, South Seberang Perai here in Penang. Triggered by the death of his assemblyman, Nur Zamri Latif on May 24, all eyes are on the coming straight fight between the Perikatan Nasional and Pakatan Harapan candidates. Traditionally a Barisan Nasional seat, since the 1974 Penang state elections, Sungai Bakap became a PKR-PH stronghold from 2008 until 2023. That, however, changed when past man, the late Zamri, won over half the votes, beating the PKR candidate Nur Hidayah Cik Ros. But can PN go the distance and keep the seat? Just shy of the campaign fortnight, there's already controversy surrounding the PN candidate's academic credentials. PAS Abidin Ismail, who had his candidacy announced by Party Deputy President Datuk Sri Tuan Ibrahim Tuan Man, was said to hold an ISO certification. That, of course, was later noted as a mistake, since ISO certifications are meant only for companies and statutory bodies. Abidin was then compared to his opponent, PKR's Johari Arifin, who holds a doctorate degree. Will this ruin PN and Abidin's chances? Voters in Sungai Bakap are divided in their views about the matter.
Tahap pendidikan tu tak penting. At least ada diploma ke, at least dia sama belajar lah. Kalau orang yang education ni, cara pertuturan dia lebih yang cakap bijak lah. Dan dia boleh fikir benda yang baik-baik untuk menambahbaikkan negara ni kan. Kalau macam kita pentingkan, kalau dia PhD tapi dia tak function, dia tak buat kerja ke, tak boleh juga kan.
Pada saya mungkin ijazah sarjana muda lah paling tinggi lah. Tapi kalau ada PhD, pangkat doktor dan sebagainya, itu adalah satu kelebihan pada diri mereka masing-masing lah. Bukan semua orang layak untuk PhD, belajar di tempat yang lebih tinggi. Tidak. Tapi pada saya ijazah sarjana muda itu adalah pangkat yang tinggi bagi mereka lah.
Lu personally 我是讲看主观就好啦，你出来到家出社会係咪咯
Badan masalah rakyat macam mana itu pun dah cukup.
Here, several neighbourhoods often experience water supply disruptions, adding to a list of problems. While the state and federal government have promised to resolve it, affected voters are not amused with the 6-year-long issue. They are also not happy with the soaring cost of living and diesel subsidy rationalisation, seen as a PH unity government issue, and it seems to be working in PN's favour.
Kita jadi penesak. Anda kita kalau kerajaan ni kita sesuatu besar kerajaan semua kerajaan. Jadi bila kita berbakang jadi penesak yang kuat. Contohnya isu air antara yang dipanggil tiknok lah. Jika kita bawa dalam dun itu kita akan bawa dalam dun. Itu masalah yang rakyat lah kita akan bawa dalam dun insyaAllah. Dan dengan YB memang kita hadam insyaAllah.
Kau dari segi dana perlu juga adakah masalah besar macam mana besar?
Okey, itu antara cabaran bagi kita apapun beban kita dah. Lepas ni Perikatan Nasional dah lama dah jadi berbakang. Tapi alhamdulillah ada bantuan dari sahabat-sahabat. Sama tak banyak, sikit kita bagi insyaAllah. Terima kasih.
For PH Johari, He is bringing with him high hopes of wresting back the Sungai Bakap state seat. He's seen an outpouring of support from the coalition's top leadership as well as voters he has met on his campaign trail.
Tiga apa aspirasi untuk Sungai Bakap ya? Yang pertama, saya menekankan tentang konsep padu. Saya ingin menekankan padu itu daripada perpaduan. Bukan yang padu tapi perpaduan. Jadi perpaduan itu daripada perkataan akarnya padu. Jadi saya tekankan tentang yang pertama sekali tentang prasarana yang seringkali menjadi masalah pada masyarakat kita, termasuklah masalah bekalan air, banjir, juga tentang jalan raya. Yang kedua, saya ingin menekankan tentang A, iaitu faktor akhlak, akademik dan anak muda. Saya juga ingin menekankan tentang huruf B, iaitu tentang damai. Kita akan cuba memastikan bahawa sekurang-kurangnya untuk peringkat ini kita akan melaksanakan politik secara berakhlak, kempen secara berakhlak, dan kita cuba mengulurkan pendamaian. U untuk semua. Kita dipilih oleh rakyat, pelbagai kaum, pelbagai parti, pelbagai ideologi. Kita akan memberikan perkhidmatan juga untuk semua yang mengundi kita. Sama dia mengundi ataupun tak mengundi, sebagai wakil rakyat, dia adalah wakil yang bertanggungjawab untuk memastikan bahawa rakyat di bawah dunia dapat didayani secara yang adil.
Sungai Bakap's semi-rural community is largely Bumiputra, making up more than 40% of the population. The Chinese are second at 35%, while Indians are just half that at 16%. Sungai Bakap was once part of a vast sugar plantation that was subsequently replaced with oil palm. The district, South Seberang Perai, has a thriving fishing and agriculture industry. There's a lot to be developed to help boost the local economy. The question is, who is right for the job? It's going to be down to both the candidates to convince voters who can deliver on that promise. Can PH take charge again, or will PN retain Sungai Bakap? Only the polls will tell. Audrey Demawan for Beyond the Headlines in Sungai Bakap, Penang.
PH stands here in term, how to win over the votes, because we have a lot of issues that was pointed out just now, not just water issue, but also issues when it comes to roadworks, issue when it comes to settlements. Again, how can Pakatan Harapan win back voters?
Having again participated in elections at the federal, state, and also by-election level, I think the issues of the local problems, even though they will be discussed during the by-election, I don't really think those would be the benchmarks by which the voters will decide, because voters are actually much smarter than perhaps many leaders, political leaders, give them credit for. Those problems that will be there, I think they know that most likely will continue to be there. I think a lot of them vote based on prevailing sentiment. And I don't think the prevailing sentiment has shown me that there will be big changes in the electorate support for either side, and much more likely that status quo from the state elections would remain.
Do you think voters are actually faced by the elections itself?
I think for by-elections, like what Dr. Aino has pointed out, voters are generally less interested. The turnout would definitely decrease, and the interest among the younger generation tends to be lower, because we see for some of the lower salurans in the KKB by-election, and even in the state elections, tends to be lower than during the general election. So I think this trend will also continue in the Sungai Bakap by-election.
So Dr. you are saying that PAS will retain the seat?
If looking at KKB electoral returns, especially among the Malay voters, I don't think PH and BN can be confident that the swing will be coming in their favour.
Right.
So do you think that's why the party Secretary General Datuk Sri Saifuddin Nasution said that even if Sungai Bakap voters choose to re-elect PN, it would make no difference to the area? I mean, it seems to me that he's playing down the outcome of this election a little bit. And if I were a voter, I think I'd take this quite personally and feel, I don't see the sincerity coming through. You know?
He should have not said that in the first place, you know. But like what Dr. On said, maybe this time around it will still be status quo, and also they will make no difference. Perikatan Nasional, they have 11 seats, right? Now they have 10, and if they win, they return the seat, they will still have 11, and it would change it will not change the state government. So life goes on, and I do think that the voters in Sungai Bakap do not really anticipate going to the poll to vote this time around. I'm not sure whether the workers of the party machinery, they will have to strive hard in order to ensure that their voters go out and vote this coming 6th of July.
Yeah, let me just add a couple of thoughts with regards to what is at stake here. I think, like what Dr. Aino has mentioned, it's not going to affect the balance of power in the State Assembly. But perhaps what people would pay more attention to is the kind of impact on the political parties themselves. And I think the two parties that probably have the most at stake here is on the side of the unity government, it's UMNO. Because UMNO took quite a lot of pride, so to speak, in showing that it won more of the polling stations that were Malay majority in Kuala Kubu Baru compared to before. But when I looked at the actual results, looking at the polling station and Saluran results, I found that the Malay voter base is still quite firmly in the PN's camp with easily 80% Malay support. So then with UMNO mobilizing, as what President Zahid Hamidi has said, all of its forces to go out to win back the Malay support for the unity government's candidate, I think a lot of people would be looking at UMNO's ability to deliver. So that's one. And on the side of Perikatan Nasional, unlike in KKB, where a Bersatu candidate was fielded, now it is a PAS candidate. And there were people who were saying that perhaps PAS didn't campaign as strongly for the Bersatu candidate in KKB. So now they have the responsibility of maintaining this seat that used to be a PH seat in the past. And I think there is a lot of pressure on PAS to show that even though the so-called green wave has more or less peaked, it has to maintain it at that level of at least 80% Malay support for PN if it's going to make any considerable dent in the parliamentary and also state seats that are more than 60% Malay majority.
In terms of choosing a PH candidate, what sort of arguments can we make in the situation if it does go to Pakatan Harapan? What is the first course of action when it comes to the unity government to buy back the trust, especially when it comes to the constituency?
Okay, so I think by choosing a local candidate who is well educated, who is a civil servant, who was a former civil servant, who speaks well, that definitely would give PH some confidence that at least it will not have shot itself in the foot by fielding a candidate that is not so presentable. So it would have taken care of those kinds of worries. Beyond that, whether or not that candidate can deliver the X factor, the additional 5 to 10% swing that is needed, it's very, very difficult in a short period of time, especially in the context of a by-election where people are not so interested in the topics. Right? And I remember, for example, the Teluk Intan by-election where DAP fielded a Malay candidate, a young Malay lady by the name of Diana Sophia, with the hopes of being able to attract the more Malay votes against a very strong candidate, a local candidate, Datuk Ma from Gerakan, who was the former MP in Teluk Intan, and he managed to win that seat. And I saw the electoral returns that the DAP candidate in that context didn't really win more Malay votes compared to before, right? So that really shows me that it's not easy to swing the sentiment just based on the personality and and the qualifications of that candidate, unless that candidate is so outstanding, so eloquent in his speeches, so visionary in the way he wants to communicate his aspirations for the constituency that you're able to do a sort of like a Barack Obama type a swing. I don't really see that happening in Sungai Bakap.
Right. One last question though.
Okay. So in terms of the importance and the kind of level of things at stake here between PN and PH, is this more important for PN to retain the seat than it is for PH to take it back from PN? Because, I mean, if you look at it on the state level, PH does have, the 40 seats, right? I think it's 40 to 10. If I'm mistaken,
29.
Sorry, 29. So yeah, in terms of like the changes that it would bring, even if they were to lose this, is it more important now for PN to hold this seat, retain the seat, than it is for PH to really do anything about it?
I think that PN they wanted to really win this seat because they wanted to show to the general public that they are still relevant, even though they have a lot of issues nowadays, especially the 6 members of parliament from Bersatu, who their seats are supposedly to be vacated. And then this shows that PAS wanted this to be a moral support for them to still be relevant. And like what Dr. Ong said, that the pattern of the Malay voters are now towards Perikatan Nasional. So they want to really retain this and to ensure that people still see Perikatan Nasional, especially PAS, as still relevant in the political landscape in Malaysia.
Yeah, for me, the pressure is always on the incumbent party. That means the party who previously held the seat before the by-election. So in the case of Kuala Kubu Baru, the pressure was on DAP and PH to retain that seat. Yeah. In this case, the pressure is on PAS and Perikatan Nasional to show that it can retain that seat.
Right. But even from Abidin's response to, let's say, if they are not able to retain the seat, he seems to be quite okay about it because PAS has always been in a position that has not been, visible, especially when it comes to the federal level.
But yeah, that may be the personal views of an individual candidate, whether it's on one side or the other. But I'm talking about from the perspective of political narratives and also political strategy. That has always been the case where the incumbent has much more pressure to retain that seat. Because if, let's say, PH loses, they can say, this seat was won by the other side during the state elections, right? And that remains the status quo. And we can continue to govern Penang the way we governed it before the by-election.
Right.
But if, let's say, PH wins, then they can say, the tide is swinging, and then that is something that I think PN wants to avoid, which is why it feels more pressure, I think, to retain the seat.
Right. That I know. Regardless of whoever would win eventually, what are some of the key issues at stake here, especially if they don't necessarily address it immediately, because Sungai Bakap's situation, apparently when it comes to the water issue, is like 6 years long already, right? And then I read a report somewhere mentioned that, Kedah wanted to sell water to Penang for the bigger context of it all, but then again, the state blocked it, and then the state was saying this water situation in Sungai Bakap in particular will be resolved by 2028. But from now to 2028, that's a little bit long, right? So in your point of view, whoever wins the seat, what must they actually focus on first, especially when it comes to local concerns here?
Yeah, Abidin had said that they will still continue with what the late Assemblyman did, in which they wanted to proceed with the notion that the water issue should be resolved. because we see the water treatment plant is from Sungai Dua up north, going towards 50 kilometer downwards. So it's a bit difficult, but definitely it has to be the intervention from the federal government in order for this to be resolved. So I do think that slowly but surely the water issue will not be an issue anymore after this by-election in the general election 16. I do hope that this thing will be resolved once for all, and in order for people in Sungai Bakap to ensure that they have a livelihood that is continuously without the eruption of water supply and other things that can disrupt their livelihood.
Quick prediction before we end the discussion. PN or B?
Before this, I have the guts that Pakatan Harapan could win, but with what Dr. Ong said.
No, you should stick with your what your gut says. You know?
Correct, but
it's okay. We still have one more week of campaigning left, so but just early prediction.
If we see the tradition of this 7 by-election before this, is all status quo, you know. But I do think that Pakatan Harapan might have a better chance this time around, because if you see from 2008, 2013 and 2018, Pakatan Harapan had won this seat with a majority between 1,800 to 2,300. So maybe this time around they can recapture the seat from Perikatan Nasional.
I think it will be a close fight, and I think the status quo from the 2023 state elections would likely remain.
Let's bet on it.
Pergi mamak lepas ni.
Take it out.
And we got a week left.
Take it out, yeah.
Anyway, to our audience again, thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, this is the end of the episode. I would like to thank my guest that's here on set, Dr. Aino. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Ong Kia Ming, thank you so much again as well. And if you like this particular episode, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, turn on that notification bell, because you're not only going to get beyond the headlines update, other reports related to NSA Online will be delivered to you. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, as well as Twitter. My name is Amalina Kamal.
And I'm Hazmi Hassan.
And I'll see you next week. Bye.